Today we have Coach Tommy Boyer Kendrick, veteran strength coach, performance consultant, and the founder of TBK Athletics. So he's worked with athletes at the highest levels over the last 30 plus years, from NBA, NFL, the Olympics, across the world, really. And although that's exciting and that's like, wow, like he's worked with some really cool athletes, his passion is with the student athlete. And so, really excited to have him on the podcast today. Really taking the podcast in a different route. We're going to be talking about a fictional character, a fictional athlete, but realistic athlete. And we're going to be breaking down how Tommy would train that athlete. So Tommy, thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Thanks for having me, Nick.
Yeah, of course. So just to give you some context on this athlete. So we're talking about a 15-year-old high school football player. He's 5'11", 140 pounds. So a little bit on the smaller side for a football player, but he wants to get stronger, faster, play D1, super common athlete. And so he wants to play D1. And yeah, so what would be, if you're taking this athlete and they want to get stronger, faster, and really like perform at a high level, what would be your first step in week one with them?
Great question. Step one is and always has to be an evaluation and assessment, a thorough look at the athlete completely. Biomechanics, function, mobility, speed, movement. Really get a picture of how their body works from head to toe, medical history. Some of them are coming off injuries or have had injuries. It's important to know that. A lot of data and video analysis involved in that evaluation, from use of data collecting tech, as well as a lot of video analysis, which then is formulated into a report that then I keep and use as the baseline foundation of how to prescribe what to do. At that point, I'm also discussing with the athlete, what is our plan moving forward? How frequently are we training? How long? What seasons do they have outside of football? I have some guys that train with me 5 days a week. So that's very different than 2 days a week. And he just said D1 football player, 15 years old. That means, am I going to have that athlete for 2 to 3 years? I start developing a long-term plan early, even though we have short-term and short-range goals as well. So the evaluation assessment is step one. And then as soon as that's done, the very next day is beginning with training. I am notorious as a movement-based coach first. So if an athlete doesn't move well, it doesn't matter how much weight they can lift. So movement always trumps weight room, even though they are done together. Speed wins, and we know that in every game now, especially football. So speed and movement is the predominant, marker for an athlete having a chance to play college ball, not so much their bench press. So speed is always going to be the biggest priority right off the bat, and not linear speed, but game speed. Lots of change of direction, agility, plyometrics, and the strength work is a big part of that every day. So it's not like we're not doing a bodybuilder routine here. This isn't chest and tries one day, back and bis another day. No, that's not how I train an athlete. Our body works holistically as one big piece, one organism, and that can be a very complex mechanism. So you really have to map that out, because 2 days a week versus 3 versus 4 is a very different training plan. So if I can have an athlete for 3 or more days a week, obviously the progress can happen much quicker.
So going, we'll kind of start at the beginning there. I want to look at that assessment piece because, yeah, like, a lot of coaches get right into training. Like you'll have guys, you look at the facilities and stuff, it's like, okay, drop in, they immediately come in and they start working out with the whole group. And there's like probably 20, 30, 40 plus athletes in like one room, and you don't even know how each individual one necessarily moves. Like, why is it so important to have those assessments right off the bat?
Great question. Yes. The larger the group, the more difficult it's going to be to get people individualized training. And even though I work in groups, the groups are not very large. So I limit the number enough to know that I can be monitoring each person, even if they're not doing the same thing pretty well. But each individual has to know up front what their areas of biggest need are. So, for example, when I have an athlete that understands their hip mobility and their ankle mobility are compromised or not very good, they have certain things in their warm-up process that might look different than someone else who already has great ankle and hip mobility. And that can vary person to person. So it's kind of like we put them into categories. This one's a mobility person. This one is a proprioception, stabilization person. This one is a lot more fast twitchy. This one's a lot more heavy footed. And so they're kind of categorized into almost like archetypes, and they get to know who they are, almost by self recognition And in the room, they know why someone is doing certain drills and they're not doing them yet, perhaps. So I don't ever have 30 or 40 athletes at one time. If so, I'd have to employ other coaches to help me. I kind of have a ratio. It's like, look, once there's more than 10 to 1, I'm not sure I'm offering the athlete good enough value in their training. And I hate to be a knock on most gyms and businesses, but that's exactly what they're doing. Is they've got kids from 10 to 18 years old in one group, and they're all running through quick foot ladders, which you won't see me use a quick foot ladder hardly ever. And I'm not really sure what we're doing other than giving them general fitness. And if I have a 15-year-old, 5'11", 140-pound kid come in saying he wants to play D1 and he means it, general fitness ain't going to ever get him to D1. And certainly 5'11", 140, I'm not saying that won't work, but we got some work to do. So we got to immediately be able to get them into the training that is their immediate first needs. For a lot of people, their movement mechanics are really poor. And we're talking about just the ability to decelerate properly. Not many people train deceleration. It's a little more popular now. All they want to do is sprint. Well, I need my athlete to stop. So deceleration, change of direction, true agility is reactive. So training those type of things is not boxing them into a bunch of rigid drills. So my training will look a little bit different than many facilities. We're not just doing the same old patterned work every day. Because again, their body is complex and dynamic, and their mind is also a part of it as well. So speed and movement trump strength, but that doesn't mean strength isn't part of the daily equation. Spine, pelvis, and core are always on the daily menu, even if it's just a little bit. And that could be spinal mobility, not necessarily spinal strength. So I've got some kids who could squat a lot of weight, but they can't bend to their side. Well, that's not going to work in a lot of sports to be successful. So again, we must have a dynamic approach to developing the athlete. You don't see record boards on the wall of how much you squatted. Those are irrelevant in our environment. The only thing relevant is personal improvement. And those personal improvement goals are set with the athlete together with me. So they have something to strive for, but they're not worried about beating somebody else. They're purely focused on self-improvement. And when that happens, the whole room wins anyway. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I love that. And I love that you focus on the movement first, because I mean, we hear the stories of, or see the videos of the squat, the kid squatting all this weight, and you're like, that doesn't look good, or deadlift, oh, that doesn't look good. And then, who knows what happens over time as they continue to, do that. And so what would you say are some of the biggest movement flaws that you see, like in mechanics and whatnot, with whether it be for speed or for strength stuff?
Another great question. Gosh, the more you learn about movement, the more complicated you realize movement is. Just the way the foot strikes the ground, for example. The foot's the first point of contact. Most people's foot hits the ground and it's already gone wrong right there from the first impact. And then it just runs up the kinetic chain, wreaking havoc on the human body. And, it's like, where do you start? And I go, well, we need to break this down into what Altus, Dan Paff and Stu McMillan, who are mentors of mine. I'm in the Altus group taking the coaching eye movement, where we literally just watch these videos and we look at the body positions and postures and we break it down into frames and we look at every point in that kinematic sequence and we ask ourselves, are we in good positions? And the answer is none of us are in good positions most of the time. Okay, well, how can we make them a little bit better? Striving for perfection is great, but we need to settle for progress. So if I can just get the foot to strike the ground, then that can run right up through the shank or lower leg into the knee, and then up into the hip, into the spine, and then we can watch the way the body works as one piece. Is it fluid? Is it rhythmic? Most people don't even have very good rhythmic movement. I mean, they don't even skip well, so we're starting off with basic movement patterns, and we just try to get them to establish those first with confidence and with repeatability and repeatability and repeatability.
Yeah. It's funny because we're kind of like asking also side questions, but I also think about, like, when we think about this 5'11", 140-pound football player, they probably have all these issues. So you talked about too, I wanted to ask about actually you were talking about daily doing the spine, the pelvis, the core, like what some athletes are like spine, pelvis. Like what does that look like? What does that mean? Like, so can you expand a little bit more on like what types of exercises or mobility type movements you'd be doing with those?
Sure. Like typically a kid might go through a dynamic warm up now before practice. They'll be doing a lunge walk. Well, and a lunge walk's great, but they're just thinking about their legs. So we might do a lunge walk and extend our arms overhead and be leaning to the side while lunge walking. And Stu McMillan calls this turning on the spinal engine. When we think about the human anatomy, right, and you look at that skeleton, right, outside of the four limbs and a head, it's a spine and that pelvic girdle, right? Those two big issue, the ilium and just those big flanked hip bones, right?
Yeah.
Those two hip bones in that spine are really the anchor of the human body and the powerhouse, right? It's all the big muscle is anchored, there somewhere, right? All the quads and the hammies and the glutes and the low back, and that's where we get most of the juice to move the human body and to do athletic movements, from pitching a baseball to sprinting, right? And so we have to think about, how do those pieces work? Bones move, and muscles have tendons that attach to bone. So what are our tendons like? Do we have the right amount of rigid tendon stiffness, but do we have the right amount of mobility in joints between bones? And that sounds pretty high level, but again, I don't want to confuse the athlete. It's for me to know that, and for me to be able to give them the exercises that can get those joints and bones and those parts moving well. So it involves lots of three-dimensional movement in their warm-up, twisting, bending, reaching, even three-dimensional movement in the weight room. We're so boxed into this one, dimension. It's transverse, it's sagittal, it's frontal. No, human movement is all dimensions and all vectors. And I believe in applying that in everything from speed to strength. So it looks a little different than just, hey, do some butt kickers up and down the field. Now we're ready to go. I'm like, no, I'm like, hop on one leg. Hop on one leg while turning clockwise and counterclockwise. And you don't see that in standard warm up. But in mine, we won't run until we've bounced on two legs and one leg in every direction imaginable. And then, so the foot contact is number one. We call it pogo hopping. Can they pogo hop, which is a straight-legged hop, which really builds tendon stiffness in the Achilles tendon, which is the number one spring mechanism for speed and elastic potential. So we start there. And then we go to the patellar tendon of the knee, probably the two most important tendons for the lower body in a human that's playing sports, of course, and really building those tendons up to be bulletproof. Because underneath all this performance enhancement, though I don't tell the kids that very much because they're not interested in it, but injury prevention actually has to be my number one focus. I don't tell the kids that because they're not interested in that, because they never get hurt. Parents like hearing that, though. They like knowing that what we're going to do is keep their kids healthy while making them into a better athlete as well. And as a parent, I value that myself.
So I like, yeah, I like that framework. I mean, I'm the same way, where it's like, yeah, they come to me, they want bigger, stronger, faster, leaner, stronger, faster. I'm like, okay, like that's our foundation, nutrition, whatever. But then on the back end, we're addressing things that also help with that injury recovery. So it's addressing that bigger picture. So with this athlete, we're bringing back to the athlete, they really want to gain the size, they really want to gain the muscle. They might be a little impatient with it, and they're like, okay, well, like we got to do this movement thing and the speed thing. And it's like, how do you balance that with this athlete who's like, yeah, I really want to get to 165 or whatever.
Well, and that could be very typical. Take your average 15-year-old boy that wants to put on muscle. First of all, they want to look better in the mirror without a shirt on. I'm not going to try to fight that. Let's do that. They want to go buy supplements. They want to run off to the store and buy everything that everyone has told them is going to make them bigger. They're going to try fad diets. You know this better than me, all the stuff you hear, and it just drives me insane. The hardest thing for a young person to do, it gets easier with age, is to have patience in the consistency of their work leading to quality results. Luckily, I've done this a long time, and they see what I've done with other kids. And they see someone 30 pounds bigger than a couple of years ago. And I'll literally use them as my best ammo. And I'll say, hey, Garrett, how much did you weigh 3 years ago? How much do you weigh now? Have you been following any magic weird supplement plan, or are you just eating a good amount of food, training hard, and getting a good night of sleep, right? Not skipping meals, And he goes, yeah. And I'm not setting him up. I really need people in the room that have done it, that these younger kids look up to. Because you're right. Now, if they're really going to be that gung ho on gaining weight, I'll start asking them questions about their eating habits. And I'm not going to try and be an RD, but I'm just going to start asking a few basic questions. Like, hey, what'd you have for breakfast? Well, that sounds great. Well, no, Pop Tarts doesn't sound great. You're not going
Or
to.
bowl with cereal.
Yeah. And I go, well, we might need to rethink the food if we're going to gain that kind of quality lean muscle. Now, I do body composition testing because I don't want a young kid just to pack on 30 pounds of cruddy weight. We know that won't help them for performance or health, but they just want the weight. And maybe their coaches have told them, I need you to gain 25 pounds this summer. 25 pounds in the summer, that's just ludicrous. It's a horrible idea. And so I have to fight coaches' comments, kids' belief system, as you might have to too. And you really have to help dispel some of these myths by leading them right back to science, what we know works, and why gaining weight fast is probably not a great idea. But yes, you can make these gains slowly but surely with good training, good eating, good night of sleep, and repeat. And I believe in the consistency of habits paying off in everything, in speed development, in weight gain, in strength development. I've seen it happen from all types, that you don't have to be genetically gifted for those things to happen. I'm living proof. So it's amazing what happens with enough consistency. But yeah, it's hard fighting off all the things that they want to try for shortcuts, and that's tough. Oof. Sometimes that gets dicey too. I'll actually get into almost arguments with kids. I'm like, look, I can't support you taking those kind of supplements. I'm not comfortable with you doing it. And sometimes I've got to call a parent and have an uncomfortable conversation with a parent. But you know what? At the end of the day, Nick, I'm professionally responsible. And I actually take my job very seriously, although I laugh and have a lot of fun. Underneath all that, I have a responsibility, and I can't skirt that simply for a kid to pack on some muscle.
One, it's like, the thing that I tell athletes, and I talk more about in my content, is like, do you want size or do you want performance? Because the way, with some of them, the way that they're trying to do it, they're trying to, like you said, like either gain the size or lose weight, and they're doing it by sacrificing performance. They're like, well, like I'm leaning out because and yeah, I'm gonna lose a little bit of strength, but then I'm just gonna build it back. And I'm like, why don't you lean out and get stronger at the same time? Because those can go together. It's not mutually exclusive there. So do you run into that too? I know we're talking about the gaining athlete, but I feel like this is big for those linemen and for the other athletes trying to lean out too.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we want it all, and kids want it all more than adults, and I was the same way when I was a teenager, right? And so we want to look great, be muscular, be the guy out there making the plays on the field, be the best player, score all the touchdowns. And that sounds great, but we got to live in the real world too. And I don't want to tell them they can't have all that. You never know. But I'm wearing a Wazoo Cougar shirt right now because one of my athletes is the starting left guard, Johnny Lester. Johnny graduated high school at about 245. Now you're going, wait a minute, he's a starting left guard? Johnny never played line in high school once, not for a minute. But Johnny was a big kid, and I knew he was going to become a large man simply based on girth and circumference measurements of his hands, feet. Johnny has an unbelievable level of mobility for a big man that is jaw dropping and eye opening. And when I met him at like freshman year in high school, I was like, what is that? That's a specimen. That's different. That's unique. And Johnny had no interest in working out for a while. And I said, you don't need to. Well, I got to get bigger. I said, why? But we started working out and he just slowly started getting bigger. Well, that was 245 senior in high school. Now he's at Wazoo. After 3 years, he's 295. So that's 50 pounds in 3 years. That's actually pretty monumental gain. And if you looked at a picture of him, he just got married 2 weeks ago. That was at his wedding. This man does not look 295 in a suit. He's a good looking chap, but he carries 295 well. Most people, you say 295, I'm not sure the picture's that pretty, right? Sorry, I don't mean to sound offensive. He's put on weight the right way and carries it the right way. And he's a D1 starter at a big time school. Most of my linemen, unfortunately, don't have that natural gift. And if they put on the weight excessively, it becomes, I don't know how else to say it, bad weight. And now they're just overweight. And now their movement is compromised. And after high school, it won't work. So if that 5'11", 140-pound kid said D1, that immediately changes my long-term outlook because we're going to have to do special things at that size to make D1. And getting bigger probably isn't it. I'm guessing speed will be what gets in there. Now, there's no reason I couldn't take that guy from 140 to 175 in the next 3 years and make him faster. When I do that, that's when I believe I've actually done a great job. We've gained lean mass, we've increased power, we've increased speed and movement. That is success.
Yeah.
And that's tough to do because you've got to get a young person to buy into a long-term process. And to
So,
a young kid, 3 years sounds like 3 decades to me.
so with these athletes though, like with this athlete specifically, so again, are there ways that you help get them that buy-in earlier on so that they can wait a little bit longer, they can expect, okay, this is more of a slow steady gain? And I mean, you talk about like using your athlete examples, I think that's a big one for sure. Any other key pieces on that?
I mean, not really, because they're kids. They believe anything can happen. And I love their dreamy kind of mindset. I don't want them to ever lose that when they're young. Be dreamy. But I've got to use the Johnny Lester example because he's right there. And I could say, look, this is what could happen if you're willing to do it long term. Today, there was a kid in there named Garrett who's 245 going into his senior year. And 3 years ago was like 180. I'm like, good Lord, that's a massive amount of improvement. And 3 years ago, he ran the 40 in about a 5.5. And now he's at a 4.9, almost 60 pounds bigger. So he's standing right there. There's no more powerful testimony than a kid they look up to in this town, because it's not a big town, that's going to be an all league player that made all state as a junior, that's already been offered by colleges. They're watching him and they're going, I want to be like him. And I go, well, let me show you a video of him from 3 years ago. And Garrett will say, no, don't do that. I looked horrible. I go, no, I need them to realize they're not that much different than you. They're just 3.5 years behind you. That's all. Now, Garrett, how much do you work out? And Garrett will be like 6 days a week, all year, nonstop. Right. You might not be able to do what Garrett's done. His volume of work has been monumental, and not many have matched it. But it's doable because he's standing right here, and you're looking at the guy that did it. So why not you?
Okay, that brings up a question too. You say the 6 days a week, which a decent amount of athletes are doing, but as you mentioned, some of them are, 4 or 5 of those days are splitting between different muscle groups for strength training. So what would 6 days like for him look like? Like what does that look like training wise, like the split?
Right. It's a great question. No, we don't strength train every day. If you're on a 6-day plan with me, first of all, that's rare. But for the ones that are, I would say 2 of those 6 days are almost completely focused on nothing but fascia, soft tissue, mobility, recovery, and all the other stuff that isn't ballistic or heavy loaded or full speed. Someone goes, really? Like what? And I go, well, I mean, I've got all the tools and devices, not just foam rollers and lacrosse balls, but I mean, all sorts of stability ball work and Bosu ball work and banded exercises and very therapeutic looking work, restorative work. So a little eye-hand coordination stuff. There's other attributes the athlete needs, not just what weight can you lift and how fast can you run. So we time it. It'll be like Monday, Tuesday are intense. Then all of a sudden Wednesday, I'll call it a drop back day, and we'll unload that body and they'll rejuvenate. So kids that are serious, it's amazing. They will really do all this work to be better. I wish I would have done that at that age. I mean, I was missing out. But so the different training models are based on that intensity and commitment of days of work. Most of my athletes are 2 or 3 days a week. So there is speed and strength each of those days, and it's full body. That is the average athlete. The exceptional ones will start coming more days a week because they just know that there's more work they could do. So let's do it. Right. And I don't push that. I'd rather get an athlete to come and start maybe 2 or 3 days a week. And I tell every parent, they go, well, how often should we come? And I go, it's up to the athlete. They can come as much as they want, but why don't we start with a habit that is appropriate? I'm not going to let them start 5 days a week. Their body can't handle that anyway, and it would just lead to some negative side effects, and I don't want that. I don't want them to get burnt out, overtrain, or get hurt. Their habit will grow as their mindset and their maturity and their focus grows, and it's kind of neat to watch that happen because they just want to. The ones who get it want to just keep training more and more and more. And then the hard part is having them understand that more isn't better. To go home and get a better night of sleep. One of my funnest things to do, Nick, is you're the RD, but I have kids send me pictures of their dinner to my phone. And they ask me, is it dialed? I don't even look at it. I immediately put a heart on it and say, that's awesome. Because it's homemade food that they're eating. And it's basic stuff, right? and they're proud of it. They're proud of it. And I want them to know I'm proud of them. And I want them to go to sleep feeling great about their habits because I truly believe the mind has a massive impact on their body. And the more they start instilling these habits, nutrition being a big part of it, sleep being a big part of it, their training just starts skyrocketing and their gains skyrocket. And then what does that do? Give them even more confidence in the process, right? In what they're doing, which leads to even more gains. So it's amazing. The ones that do the most work are the ones actually eating the best. Of course they are, because they're buying into that being an impactful part of what they're doing. And then once again, I get to use them as an example. I might even put it on my Twitter and go, look at the pictures some of my athletes sent me last night. So proud of you. Man, keep up that great work. Because when I was a teenager, Nick, ain't no way am I cooking food. And if it was, mac and cheese.
Yeah.
So they're doing a lot better job, and I'm proud of them, and it impresses me. So sometimes I think I've got to remind myself I don't need to have low expectations for kids because they're kids. If they're driven, they'll do things better than adults will do it. So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. I like that. Just a couple more questions before we wrap up. So, for the athlete who is showing up consistently, say they're working out the 4 times a week with you, and they're still not really gaining the muscle or not really gaining the size, gaining the weight that they want. What's usually missing in those cases?
I mean, let's be honest, right? 3,500 calories equals 1 pound of body weight. That might be a little debatable, right? But that's the equation we have. Okay, well, let's start with that. Do you even know how many calories they're eating? The answer is usually no. They don't even have a ballpark idea. Do they know how many calories they need to eat? The answer is definitely no. So I could do the BMR, calculate what they need and all that stuff. But I go, this is where I'd rather hand it off. Hand it off. Now it's time to get to the RD, right? And I want to do that because I need the athlete to be confident that they know I'm seeking out professional help. As soon as you leave your scope of practice, I think you become dangerously naive, right? I could talk to them about my meal prep and all the food I make, but that's just me trying to do my own healthy thing. I didn't tell them to eat that, but I said, but you know what? There's people that can help. You really want to get this dialed in? Let's start looking at your food. Because most of the time for these young athletes, you probably know, most of them aren't eating enough. I mean, good Lord, if you came and saw me put them through a workout, which someday maybe you will, right? You'd be going, holy crap, Tommy, like, how much are they going to go home and eat? They need to go eat 2,000 calories for dinner just to make up for what they just did. And I go, I know, and they're not. And I go, these kids are like a metabolic furnace. You can just keep shoveling in, and it really doesn't even have to be that clean. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. Nothing wrong with a roast beef sandwich. Eat 3 of them, right? I'm not trying to preach tofu kidney bean salad here, all right? Like, let's get real for a minute. You know what I mean, Nick? They need that anyway. But, that's where you come in because I've got the physical end of it covered. They're doing the right work. We're stuck. We're not making the right gains. It's probably food and sleep. And it's nice to have people to call on that can help those kids do that. And of course, I'm immediately following up with them even when they begin with someone in nutrition. So I can be a supportive role. How can I be supportive? Do I ask about it? Yes, of course I do daily. And what happens is, again, like I said, they start becoming proud of the fact that they've made that habit better, and then it fuels improvement. And then they're validated by having taken their nutrition just a little more seriously. Not enough to be stressful, right? I don't want that. But there's a way to enjoy your food and have it help lead to the results you're looking for. So that's why I think for the athlete, ultimately, they have to have a team of people helping them outside of their parents, which are the ultimate support system, of course. So a lot of times it's me calling up a parent going, hey, we really need to kind of look at the food and the fuel and see if we're well fueled to make the kind of gains they want to make the game because they're frustrated. They're on the scale and it's 141 after 2 months. And by now they should have made a better gain. And I feel for them because remember, part of that's going to be, I almost look at it like part of that's my failure. They told me what their goal was. My job is to help them reach their goal. If we're not doing that, I'm failing. And I have to look at it like a failure and do something about it. And that's when I go right back to I take my job seriously. Failures, I went to West Point. Failure is unacceptable. So for me personally, so if I let down these kids, I mean, that's all I do, Nick. That's all I've got. Well, not really. I've got a lovely wife, but you know what I mean?
Yeah.
My pride in what I do comes from their successes. I'm living vicariously through my athletes.
Yeah. I love that. And it's I mean, I knew just based on it wasn't I mean, yes, it was a setup, but in a way, because I knew in a sense, what you were going to say. We just need to make it more black and white. But the other thing, I mean, I do want to emphasize the sleep, and we could go on about that. I recorded a podcast recently on that, but that is one where it's like, yeah, that's where the growth hormone is. Like, you get good sleep, and you got more of that growth hormone going on. You got a lot of good things happening when you get into that deep sleeps. Just a quick little side there. Yeah, I feel like we addressed a lot of key things on the progression of the athlete and the training. The last thing I want to leave with is, again, you've worked with a lot of high level athletes, both already at the high level, but also, who are, you have your WSU, you have a lot of different guys that have played at higher levels. What is the difference maker in the ones who reach their full potential versus the ones who don't?
That's a great question. It's hard to pinpoint one attribute. I mean, it might sound cliche, but they all developed a work ethic and never took their foot off the gas. There weren't gaps, there weren't letdowns in any time of the year. They didn't get distracted by social scene. They were willing to give up other things. Weekends at the lake in the summer. They were able to set aside other things to make their goal in sports a higher priority. And sometimes I have to be careful with that, though. These are young kids. I want to make sure that sports isn't the only thing in their life. I think that can be dangerous. But Johnny at Wazoo just got married a couple weeks ago. His priority is not football first, and that's a starting Pac 12 football player who's also a 4.0 student in chemistry. So he's got other things going on in his life. But, the ones who had that kind of success, they work. They stay driven, they stay focused, and they work. Results are variable. Good days, bad days, they just keep working. And others fall to the wayside. And others get distracted. Now they got a car, they got a girlfriend, parties to go to, whatever it is, and they become less focused on their work. And that's okay. They're kids. The ones that stand out are the ones that simply, just like a student would, put more work in, make it a bigger priority in their life. And when that happens, it's not the person that just has the best genetics. Most of the time, they don't actually have the best work ethic anyway. So I've seen so many amazing things with young people, and actually nothing anymore surprises me. So, Brett Rippon's playing in the NFL, went to Shadle Park High School. That doesn't sound real, but I'll be flying out to Minnesota at some point in the fall to see a Vikings game and give him a little hug, grab a picture, and say, keep working. Because his work today is still just as focused, if not more than it was 15 years ago.
Is there any last things you want to leave the athletes with that maybe we missed, or that, is really just like, you're like, I want these athletes to hear this?
Be confident, be positive, surround yourself with people that are extremely positive, have fun, because I think you can work hard and have fun. And that's actually probably my mission in training. Let's work hard, let's have fun. And let's do both. And I truly mean let's do both. I like to joke around a lot because, man, I think smiling and laughing just does something for our spirit. And I think when we do that, we can unleash something inside of us that we might not even know is there. And I don't want to take that belief away from myself, and I'm not going to take it away from any kid either. And I like Mr. Rogers, who is probably my hero and my favorite person ever, as he said to everyone in his show, I like you just the way you are. He didn't ask you to change or be different. I like kids just the way they are. And let's go get better. And if we don't, let's have fun. And tomorrow we'll get better. But I feel like kids are living under so much stress nowadays than ever before. And I don't know, I think it's us as adults that have caused it. But it's also social media, our phones, and other elements. And I want to take that away from them and just let them be kids. And man, I've seen kids that weren't that great at athletes become first team all league. And it literally changes every other part of their life because of their self-worth, self-confidence, the relationships they build with other people. It's great. So be yourself and be confident and be positive. And anybody else that doesn't do that for you, find other people to be around.
I love that. That's a good way to wrap this up. I always love ending on a mental thing or a mindset thing, and that is a huge one that a lot of us forget, for sure. But yeah, Tommy, I just want to thank you so much for hopping on the podcast tonight.
Thank you. I appreciate it, Nick. I'll have to check you out when I get to Seattle, and soon we'll have to go out and get coffee.
Yeah, and if we can figure out something in Spokane and try to get something going there too, I'm definitely down.
Always. Let's go, man. You throw an idea at me, I'll have you come over and we'll talk nutrition to all my athletes and have some fun. I would love it.
Sounds good. Awesome. Well, yeah. For the listeners, just make sure you guys check the show notes, check for Tommy's socials down below. And as always, keep striving for greatness.